My own son spat in the salad I lovingly made for him just because he was embarrassed at his new job. He did it to break my spirit and show me my place. Make sure you subscribe because you won't believe how his own colleagues helped me turn that humiliation into my ultimate triumph. My name is Eleanor, and my world has always revolved around the quiet language of care. For me, love has a scent. It smells like yeast rising for fresh bread, like garlic sizzling in olive oil, like the rich, dark aroma of a chocolate cake baking on a Sunday afternoon. For 30 years, I was a wife and a mother, and my kitchen was the heart of our home. Now, my husband is gone, and my son Mark is a grown man of 32, navigating the sharp-edged world of corporate ambition. But for me, he'll always be my little boy, the one with scraped knees and an endless appetite. He'd started a new job a few months back, a junior marketing position in a sleek glass and steel office building downtown. It was a big step up for him, and I was so proud it made my heart ache. But every time he called, his voice was laced with a weary frustration that I knew all too well. "The food here is terrible, Mom," he'd complain over the phone one evening. "It's either a $10 sad desk salad that tastes like wet paper or some microwaved mystery meal from the vending machine. All the guys are saving money, so we just order the cheapest takeout. I think my stomach is starting to unionize and protest." I laughed, but my heart clenched. I pictured him, my strong, smart son, hunched over his desk eating greasy cardboard pizza. A mother's love is a stubborn, irrational thing. You can't just turn it off. And so, an idea, born of that fierce, primal need to nurture, took root. I would make him lunch. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. I moved around my kitchen with a renewed sense of purpose. I decided to make his absolute favorite from childhood, my slow-cooked beef stew, rich with carrots and potatoes, and a side of homemade biscuits. I packed it all carefully into a brand new thermal container, a modern lunchbox that felt alien in my hands. It felt like I was packing his school lunch for the first day of kindergarten all over again. Showing up at his office was intimidating. The lobby was all cool marble and hushed efficiency. A young woman at the front desk looked at my simple dress and the lunchbox in my hand with an expression of polite confusion. When Mark finally came down to meet me, his face was a mixture of surprise and acute embarrassment. "Mom, what are you doing here?" he whispered, ushering me toward a corner, away from the watchful eyes of his colleagues. "I brought you lunch, honey," I said, trying to keep my voice cheerful. "Just a little something from home." He took the bag, his cheeks flushed. He looked like he wanted to vanish. You didn't have to do that," he mumbled. But as he looked inside and the rich aroma of the stew reached him, his expression softened. A flicker of the little boy I knew shone in his eyes. "Wow," he said, his voice barely audible. "Thanks, Mom." That one compliment, that small, glowing ember of appreciation, was all the encouragement I needed. I thought my simple act of love was a solution to a simple problem. I had no idea that with every container of soup and every carefully packed biscuit, I was actually lighting the fuse to a bomb of shame and resentment I never knew my son carried within him. That first week was pure joy. I had a purpose again. My mornings were filled with the happy bustle of chopping and simmering, my small kitchen once again the heart of a loving operation. I took pride in every detail, ensuring each meal was not just nourishing, but a little piece of home. One day it was hearty chili, the next a creamy chicken and rice casserole, another day a crisp, fresh salad with grilled salmon. And every evening, Mark would call with a genuinely grateful, "That was amazing, Mom." Soon, his colleagues started to notice. I would see them sometimes when I dropped off the lunch, a group of young, ambitious people in sharp suits. At first, they would just glance over, their noses twitching at the aroma wafting from my bag. Then came the comments. They were always directed at Mark, but I could hear them as I waited for the elevator. "Seriously, Mark, does your mom adopt?" a young woman with a kind smile said one day. "My lunch is a protein bar that tastes like chalk." Another colleague, a tall young man, clapped him on the shoulder. "You're making the rest of us look bad, man. My wife hasn't packed me a lunch since our honeymoon." They were good-natured, genuinely envious comments. I saw it as a victory. My son was being celebrated for having such a caring mother. I thought he would be proud, but I started noticing a change in him, a subtle shift. He began asking me to meet him in the lobby instead of coming up to the office floor. His gratitude on the phone became more forced, his voice tight. "Thanks, Mom," he'd say, but the warmth was gone. The first real sign of trouble came about 2 weeks in. Mark had come over for his weekly laundry visit, and when he was getting ready to leave, I saw it. The thermal container from the day before, still heavy, sitting on my kitchen counter. He had brought it back, uneaten. "You didn't have your lunch yesterday, honey?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. He flinched, not looking at me. "Oh yeah, sorry. We had a surprise lunch meeting with a client. I forgot to tell you." It sounded plausible, but a week later, it happened again. This time, he didn't even have an excuse. I found the full container in his car when he gave me a lift to the grocery store. When I asked him about it, his face hardened. "Mom, it's getting weird," he said, his hands gripping the steering wheel. "Everyone's always commenting, 'Mama's boy this, Mama's boy that.' They're not laughing at me, I guess, but they're laughing. It's making me look like a kid who can't take care of himself. I'm trying to build a career here." My heart sank. I couldn't understand. "But they're just being nice, Mark. They said they were jealous." "You don't get it," he snapped, his voice sharp with a frustration that stunned me into silence. "Just stop, okay? Please." His coldness was a mystery I couldn't solve, a wall I couldn't seem to break through. I was convinced he was wrong, that he was misreading their kindness. I thought that if I could just perform one grand, generous act, if I could show him how much his colleagues truly appreciated my cooking, he would finally understand. My attempt to prove my love, however, would become the very catalyst for my deepest, most public humiliation. His plea to just stop echoed in my ears for days, a mournful, confusing sound. But love, especially a mother's love, has its own stubborn logic. How could an act of care be a source of shame? I tossed and turned at night, replaying his words, his tense face. I saw his distress, but I diagnosed it incorrectly. I didn't see a 32-year-old man struggling with his professional pride. I saw my little boy, hurting, feeling left out and misinterpreting the innocent kindness of others. And, like any mother, my deepest instinct was to fix it, to smooth over the rough edges of the world for him. I formulated a plan, a grand, generous gesture that I was sure would bridge this bizarre canyon of misunderstanding. I wouldn't just show him my love. I would show him that his colleagues' envy was a form of admiration. If they could all share in the warmth of a home-cooked meal, their teasing would surely transform into genuine friendship. And Mark would see that my care was a badge of honor, not a mark of shame. It was a flawed plan, born of a desperate, loving heart, and I pursued it with the full force of my conviction. I chose Friday. I spent the entire morning in a whirlwind of joyful activity, my kitchen alive with the sounds and smells of a true feast. I decided on my famous pulled pork, slow cooked for 8 hours with my secret blend of spices until it was meltingly tender. I remembered making it for his 16th birthday party, how his friends had devoured it. I baked a pan of soft, buttery cornbread muffins, the same kind he used to beg for after school. For dessert, a classic apple pie, the crust so flaky it would shatter at the touch, just the way his father had liked it. Every dish was a memory, every ingredient a declaration of love. It was a feast, an ambassador of goodwill. I carefully packed everything into a large wicker basket, my hands steady but my heart fluttering with anticipation. On the drive downtown, I imagined the scene, the surprise on their faces, the genuine delight as they tasted my food, the camaraderie. I saw Mark, my Mark, finally relaxing, a proud smile on his face as his colleagues clapped him on the back. When I arrived at the office just before noon, the heavy basket weighing down my arms, the open plan workspace was buzzing with quiet energy. As I walked in, a delicious, warm aroma of slow-cooked pork and sweet apples began to fill the sterile, air-conditioned space. Heads popped up from behind computer monitors. The young woman, Chloe, was the first to approach, her eyes wide. "Eleanor, is that for Mark? My goodness, it smells like a holiday." "It's for everyone, dear," I said, beaming. "I thought you all could use a little taste of home on a Friday." Her face lit up. "Are you serious? You're an actual angel," she exclaimed, and soon a small, cheerful crowd had gathered around me. The tall young man, David, peered into the basket. "Is that homemade apple pie? Ma'am, you are about to make a lot of people very, very happy." My heart swelled with pride. It was working. It was all going exactly as I had planned. I looked around the group of smiling, appreciative faces, searching for my son, wanting to share this moment of triumph with him. I finally spotted him. He was standing at the far end of the office, near the large corner window, half hidden by a potted plant. He wasn't smiling. He was staring at me, his face ashen, his jaw clenched so tightly I could see the muscle twitching from across the room. The expression on his face wasn't embarrassment. It was a cold, quiet fury I had never witnessed before, a look of absolute betrayal. The happy chatter of his colleagues, the warm scent of the feast I had so lovingly prepared, it all faded into a dull, distant roar. There was only the ringing silence stretching between me and my son. He took a slow, deliberate step forward, his fists clenched at his sides, and in that moment, I knew with a gut-wrenching certainty that I had not fixed anything. I had just triggered the explosion. The cheerful buzz in the office died as Mark walked toward me. It was as if a cold front had moved through the room, silencing the warmth. His colleagues, who had been happily chatting, took a hesitant step back, their smiles faltering as they saw the thunderous look on his face. He stopped directly in front of me. His voice, when he spoke, was a low, shaking hiss of pure rage. "What do you think you're doing?" I just wanted to do something nice," I stammered, holding out the basket. From the top, I pulled out a smaller, separate container. "For you. I made your favorite, with the vinaigrette you like." It was a fresh garden salad, something light he'd appreciate. It was an olive branch. He looked at the salad in my hands, then back at my face, and a cruel, ugly smirk twisted his lips. He took the container from me. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought he might accept it. His colleagues watched, a tense silence hanging over the room. He opened the plastic lid, he looked me dead in the eye, and then he spat directly into the fresh, green salad. A collective gasp echoed through the office. It was a soft, horrified sound. I stood there, frozen, unable to process what had just happened. The act was so intimate, so full of personal contempt, that it felt like he had spat on my heart. As if that wasn't enough, he turned, walked the 10 feet to the sleek stainless steel trash can by the wall, and threw the now defiled salad inside. It landed with a dull, wet thud. "Now," he said, turning back to the stunned room, his voice dripping with venom, "does anyone else want a home-cooked meal from my mother?" No one moved. No one spoke. The pity and disgust on their faces were all for him. But I barely saw them. I couldn't feel the burning shame anymore. I couldn't feel anything at all. I was numb. I just turned and walked out of the office, leaving the basket with the feast I had so lovingly prepared on the floor, like an abandoned offering. The sound of my own heart shattering was louder than any sound in that silent office. As the elevator doors closed, I thought that my son had not just rejected my food in front of everyone, he had rejected me. I walked out of that building thinking my world had ended. I had no idea that his act of ultimate cruelty had just planted the seeds for a new, unexpected beginning. The week that followed was silent and gray. I moved through my house like a ghost, the vibrant colors of my life bleached out by the harsh, chemical sting of humiliation. I didn't cook. The kitchen, once my sanctuary of love and creation, was now just a room with cold countertops. The scent of sizzling garlic was replaced by the stale smell of sorrow. Mark called, of course. His name would flash on my phone, a painful reminder. I never answered. What was there to say? Some acts are so profoundly cruel, they shatter the very language of a relationship. Then, one evening, there was a knock on the door. Not the hesitant rap of a delivery person, but a firm, solid knock. My first thought was Mark, and a wave of panic washed over me. I wasn't ready. I didn't know if I would ever be ready. I peeked through the curtains. It wasn't him. It was the tall young man from his office, David. And in his hands, he was awkwardly holding my large wicker basket. My heart pounding, I opened the door. He looked deeply uncomfortable, but his eyes were sincere. "Mrs. Eleanor?" he began, his voice quiet. "I am so sorry to bother you. You left this." He held out the basket. I just stared at it, at the neatly folded tea towel that I had placed on top of the food that was now long gone. I made no move to take it. "Can I come in for just a moment?" he asked gently. Hesitantly, I stepped aside. He placed the basket on my kitchen table, a silent, heavy monument to last week's disaster. "I need you to know," he said, turning to face me, his hands shoved nervously in his pockets, "that what Mark did was monstrous. No one in the office could believe it. The atmosphere there has been toxic all week. He's not talking to anyone, and no one is talking to him." He took a deep breath. "But that's not really why I'm here. I'm here to apologize, on behalf of us all. We were so excited about your food, and our jokes, our comments, Mark took them all the wrong way. We weren't mocking him, Eleanor. We were genuinely, deeply jealous. We all wish we had a mother who cared as much as you do." I felt the first crack in the icy wall that had formed around my heart. He cooking was the best thing that had happened in that office since it opened. Which brings me to my second reason for being here. Me and Chloe and a few others, we were talking. We miss your food a lot. And we were wondering, and please say no if this is totally out of line, if you would ever consider making lunches for us, for pay, of course, like a small private catering service. I was stunned into silence. A business proposal, born from the ashes of my humiliation. He was asking me to take the very act of love my son had spat on and turn it into a profession. The idea was terrifying. It was absurd. It was a tiny, flickering light in the darkness. His unexpected kindness was a single candle lit in my dark room of grief. He didn't just return a basket, he returned a piece of my dignity. He left me with a choice: to remain locked in the pain my son had caused, or to take a terrifying first step toward a new life, built on the very love that had been thrown in the trash. For a long time after David left, I just sat at my kitchen table, staring at the empty wicker basket. His offer was a lifeline thrown into my sea of grief, but I was terrified to grab it. Every instinct screamed at me to retreat, to lock my doors and nurse my shattered heart in solitude. The thought of pouring my love and effort into cooking again, only to risk it being thrown back in my face, was paralyzing. What if they were just being polite? What if, like Mark, they eventually grew tired of it? But then, another thought, quiet and persistent, began to push through the fear. David hadn't just returned a basket, he had returned a piece of my dignity. He and his colleagues weren't asking for the obsessive, smothering care I had forced upon my son. They were offering a simple, respectful exchange: my talent for their appreciation. It wasn't about being a mother. It was about being a cook. After a long weekend of wrestling with the ghosts of my past and the fears for my future, I picked up the phone. My voice was shaky, but for the first time in a week, it was my own. I called David and said yes. We started small. I'd prepare 5 lunchboxes a day. The first morning felt surreal. As I packed the containers, I wasn't filled with a mother's anxious hope, but with a craftsman's professional pride. David picked them up, and a few hours later, he handed me a small envelope with cash. It wasn't much, but it felt like a fortune. It was the first money I had earned for my cooking in my entire life. That afternoon, Chloe sent me a message through David. "Eleanor, that was the best shepherd's pie I've ever had. You are a culinary genius." Each compliment was a small, warm stone, helping me rebuild the foundation that my son had shattered. Soon, 5 lunches became 10, then 15. My little kitchen was alive again. One evening, David, Chloe, and 2 other colleagues came over, insisting on bringing pizza and wine. They weren't just customers anymore. They had become my friends. We sat in my living room, and they told me how Lunch by Eleanor had become the highlight of their stressful workdays. It was then that David, ever the pragmatist, mentioned that a small former deli space had just come available right around the corner from their office building. The rent was impossibly low. "You should open your own place, Eleanor," Chloe said, her eyes shining with excitement. "We'll help you. We can design a logo, set up a website." They saw a dream for me that I had buried so deep, I'd forgotten it was ever there. 2 months later, I stood with trembling hands, turning the key in the lock of my very own establishment, Eleanor's Table. It was small with just 6 tables, but it was bright, clean, and filled with the scent of fresh coffee and baking bread. The colleagues spent a whole weekend helping me paint the walls and hang pictures. On opening day, they filled every single seat, their loud, happy chatter a symphony to my ears. I had found my purpose not in the unappreciated care for one, but in the celebrated nourishment of many. I see Mark sometimes. His gleaming office building is just down the street, a glass tower in a different universe. Occasionally, at lunchtime, he'll walk by on the other side of the road, his shoulders hunched, his face pale. He never comes in. He just pauses for a moment and looks through the large front window of my cafe. He sees me behind the counter, laughing with his former colleagues. He sees the bustling, happy life I've built from the ashes of the lunch he desecrated. I don't know what he feels. Maybe it's regret. Maybe it's anger. Maybe it's just emptiness. Last night, as I was wiping down the front window after closing, I saw his reflection in the glass before I saw him. He was just standing there, across the street, watching. Our eyes met in the reflection. I didn't offer a wave or a smile. I simply held his gaze for a long moment, my expression calm and steady. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the evening crowd. I no longer feel the sting of his cruelty. I only feel a distant, sad pity for a man who, in his desperate attempt to prove his independence, had thrown away the only unconditional love he would ever know. I turned away from the window and back to my warm, fragrant kitchen. A customer had left a note on the counter. "Eleanor, whatever you're making tomorrow, put me down for 2." And I smiled. A real, genuine smile, because I knew, for the first time in my life, that I was exactly where I belonged.